Welcome, everyone. We've got a great crowd, and I hear there's more down below. So hi, ones down below, and I know that I think they can see me on a screen. So thank you so much for coming, and I know that you're here because you're interested in getting the most out of your body. It was probably about 2010 I wrote the book Self-Heal by Design. And Self-Heal by Design is a book that talks about the true role of microorganisms in disease. And it surprises me that the book is still a very popular book. And I think it's a very popular book because of what happened in 2020. You remember? How could we ever forget? Because if we human beings as a whole knew the true role of microorganisms in disease, I don't think 2020 could have happened. Because when you understand the true role of microorganisms in disease, then you realise a virus is nothing to be afraid of. The fact is, microorganisms are everywhere. They're on every surface area, they're in the air that we breathe. There are 10 times more microorganisms in the body than cells, and we've got 100 trillion cells in the body. And there are 10 times more microorganisms in the gastrointestinal tract than anywhere else in the body. Does that mean we're more plant than animal? These microorganisms are everywhere. And when the planet, the plant, the body, the environment, in and out of the body are running well, these microorganisms are an integral part of life. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at microorganisms. I have used these before, but I'm just getting used to it again, and I actually don't want green. So here we go. I think I need white. And I think I need it here. And let's see if that works. And eraser. Yes, bear with me. Let's see if that worked. Actually, I think I know what to do. Erase. Maybe it's this end. Yes. As my husband says, I'm not as silly as I look. Microorganisms. Microorganisms, as the name implies, are microscopic. That means you can't see them, but they're living things. Micro meaning microscopic, organisms mean they're living things, and they're everywhere. And these microorganisms are an integral part of life on planet Earth, but whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to change roles, just as we change roles. We were very excited when we landed here the day, was it yesterday, I think, or Sunday? We saw snow. Now I'm an Australian. We don't see snow unless we go up to Mount Kosciuszko. You might remember Mount Kosciuszko from school days. It's our highest peak. And I realised I had to dress a little differently than when I was in Florida 2 weeks ago. Just as we change roles according to the environment. So do the microorganisms. I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed on my morning walk. And I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed when I was sleeping last night. I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed in Florida. We change roles according to the environment, so do the microorganisms. And whenever cell damage happens, the microorganisms now become the cleanup team. In fact, one microbiologist said to me, we call them the garbage collectors. That's what they do. They're cleaning up the garbage. But have you noticed, oops, I've got a green there. Oops, we've got another green. It's just making it interesting, isn't it? Have you noticed do you call it a garbage collector? You call garbage trash, don't you? We don't call it trash, but I'm getting to know your lingo. Have you noticed when the garbage collectors come, they don't take your front gate, and they don't take your fence, and they don't take the tree? That's because all they're interested in is taking garbage. And that's what our own garbage collectors do. They just clean up the garbage. So whenever cell damage happens, the microorganisms, remember they're everywhere through our body, they change roles. They become the garbage collectors, and their name is bacteria. That's what bacteria is, and that's what it does. You know what that means? The more rubbish, the more waste, the more trash, the more bacteria. It's actually that simple. Now, as the environment changes, so do the microorganisms. They now become the exterminators. And the exterminators are part of cleaning up the rubbish. And the exterminator's name is yeast, and Candida is another yeast, fungus is another name, and there's another name that became very famous in 2020. It's called virus. Did you know that if you have a look at the basic functions of yeast, fungus, it's exactly the same as virus. It needs a host. Do you know what that means? It can't live on that bench there. So you know what that means? Before I touch it, I don't have to put hand sanitizer all over it, because it needs a host. As the environment changes, so do they. They now become the undertakers. And undertakers take away dead things. And the name of the undertakers is mould. And it's not long after the mould stage that the matter is brought back to dust. Now, what I have drawn for you here is the cycle of life. And the cycle of life is the cycle that takes matter, it breaks it down through these stages, and it brings the matter back to dust. And isn't that why we have compost bins? I have 3 compost bins in my garden at home. One I'm adding to, one is sitting, and one I'm taking from. So the one I'm adding to, I'm putting scraps from the kitchen, I'm putting weeds from the garden, and maybe if we've got chooks, or you call it chickens, is that right? We call the babies chickens and the adults chooks. I'll say chickens, then you know what I mean. So if we got chickens, you might scrape the chook yard, or you call it a chicken yard, and put that on, and the farmer down the road, you might put some of the manure from his cows into the compost bin, and you layer it. And the one that's sitting, I'm waiting for these microorganisms to bring matter back to dust. And then the 3rd compost bin, I know it's ready to put in my garden because tomato plants are coming up, pumpkin plants are coming up. And I've got a photograph of me in my compost bin, not those other 2, they can get a bit smelly. But the one I'm taking from, I'm squatting down and I've got a handful of it. Smells like earth. It's ready to go into my garden. And when I put it into my garden, what am I putting into my garden? I'm putting microorganisms. You see, a basic law of science states nothing's created, nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. It's called the cycle of life, or the carbon cycle. And the basic law of science states nothing's created and nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. This is imperative. Understanding the cycle of life, or the carbon cycle, it's imperative to understand that so that we know the true role of these microorganisms in disease. And something that's rarely asked is this little 3-letter word, why? So if the bacteria is ever out of control, if the yeast, fungus, virus are out of control, the mould, what should we be asking? Why? Why? And Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there's an equal and an opposite reaction. And the Bible says in Proverbs 26 verse 2, the curse causeless shall not come. In other words, no curse, no problem, no disease, nothing of any concern happens without a cause. There's always a cause. And one of my first health books was The Ministry of Healing. And I know they have some available out there. And there's a chapter called The Physician, the Educator. Did you hear that? Did you know that's what physician means? Educator. And unfortunately today, because of Medicare in Australia, I think Obamacare here, doctors are only allowed to spend 15 minutes per person. And how much are they going to learn in 15 minutes? And that's why I believe that we should be our own doctors. And part of being your own doctor is documenting your case, because we are what we are today because of all that, because of everything that's happened in our past. And I remember I was at a retreat in London a few years ago, and a lady came to me every day. She'd come and she said, Barbara, I've just remembered something else. She said, when I was 3, I fell off the tractor. That's another piece. That's another piece in the equation. And that's why it's good to go, and if Mum and Dad are still alive, Mum, what was my birth like? What did you feed me? Did I get the shot? Did I react? And by the way, if there's a fever or if the child is crying for hours, that's a reaction. And that, of course, we can't change what happened in the past, but it explains. It explains so much as to why these things are so. Rudyard Kipling, famous poet, he wrote a whole poem on this, and I'll just give you the first stanza. He said, I have 6 trusty serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what, why, when, where, how, and who. Do you have your 6 trusty serving men? Do you take them everywhere you go? And if you're at a health professional and you're asking a lot of questions, and I hope you don't go in unless you've got a whole page of them, because you're employing them to do you a service, and if they get annoyed at your questions, arise, politely excuse yourself, and leave and don't pay the bill. Have you ever been to a doctor that will not listen to you? That's very frustrating. Don't be that doctor. If the body says stop, what should you do? We're not very good at that, are we? Because if you don't listen to the first whisper, the body will start screaming. And if it starts screaming, it's doing damage. So please, that's an important part of being your own doctor, is investigating why these things are so and listening. So let's go back to the compost bins, which explains so much in the cycle of life. And I'm going to show you what I do with my... that's the right colour, isn't it? This is a plant from my garden. And underneath the ground there are roots. And I dig up my compost and I put it into my garden. In fact, before I put another crop in, I always feed the soil, because the previous crop took a lot of nutrients out of the soil, and you should not put another crop in there until you've fed the soil. And when I put the compost into the soil, what am I putting into the soil? I'm putting microorganisms. Now these microorganisms, they are now going to play another role. They now are responsible for the breakdown of the minerals in the soil. Aren't you glad we don't have to eat dirt to get minerals? We couldn't get them anyway. A lady came to me one day and she said, Barbara, I've got a terrible story for you, and I'm so embarrassed to even tell you. She said, a little 10-month-old baby ate some dog droppings. Isn't that what they do? I said, don't worry about it. It's going to go in one end and out the other. And we're going to look at that process tomorrow. We're going to start up here and end at the other end. And you will discover that the gastrointestinal tract is a hollow tube. And anything that goes in that hollow tube is not part of you or me until it gets broken down to tiny substances, absorbed out of the gut and into the blood. Then it becomes part of you or me. And I said, well, it's not something we'd really like our babies to eat, but don't worry about it. It's going in and it'll come out the other end. Same with dirt. And how many little ones that'll get their fingers and eat dirt? And my daughter, one of her babies, used to do that all the time. She'd put her on the grass to play and she'd get her little finger and eat the dirt. And the next day when she changed the nappy, I think you call it a diaper, guess what's in the nappy? Dirt. No, there is another way, and an incredible way for us to get our minerals. And it's these microorganisms. These microorganisms are responsible for the breakdown of the minerals in the soil, and then they are responsible for the absorption. The absorption of the minerals into the plant. So I'm very glad that I did have a green there, because plant blood is green. Also, these microorganisms play a protective role, protecting the plant from any harmful pathogens that might be in the soil, and these microorganisms are also responsible for the nourishment of the plant. And that plant knows that it needs those microorganisms. So 50% of the fuel that it makes from photosynthesis, it sends back down to the roots to feed the microorganisms. Beautiful illustration of the law of service that is written on every plant in nature. Have you noticed every plant takes with one purpose? To give. To give. Usually to you and me, to give. Are you starting to see that those microorganisms are actually not the enemy? If they're about, we should be asking why. Now I'm going to attempt to move my board onto another one. Oh, how did I do that? Help. Maybe here. I need to move that screen.
Do you want a blank page?
Okay. What happens if I want that one back? We won't worry about, oh yeah, how'd you do that? Now I can go to the next, how can I go to the next one? Great, thanks. Right, we're getting there. I'm going to be really good at this tomorrow night. I'm going to now take you somewhere that you may never have taken these microorganisms before, although this area is an area of great interest, and that is the gastrointestinal tract of human beings. And if you notice, they're very, very similar to the roots of the plant. Now, I've got some very exciting news. It's exciting for me. At 8:30 last night, my fourth great-grandchild was born. Now, when that baby was in her mother's womb, her gut was sterile, no microorganisms. But when that baby was born, that baby was literally showered with the mother's microorganisms. In fact, I was watching a documentary on the gut, on microorganisms, and they were interviewing a gynecologist, and he said, we always thought God made a mistake putting the birth canal and the anus so close. He said, to the point, the man was in his 70s, that 50 years ago, if a woman was in labour, we'd always give her an enema. We want to clean that area out. But he said, we now know it's a perfect design. Because when the When the birth canal stretches open with the baby coming out, that little canal next door also stretches open, and the air coming out of there is laden with the microorganisms from the colon, and the baby goes and swallows, and that's those first gulps start to take those microorganisms into the gut, and a thick turf wall starts. So my little great-granddaughter, Amelia Esther, is now feeding every few hours off her mother's breast, but there's no milk yet. The milk doesn't come in for 3 days. What she's taking in is a thick, yellowy colostrum, and it's incredibly rich, and I think it's Friday night where we're going to be looking at our immune system. And isn't that the one thing that everyone agreed on in 2020, which is about the only thing? And that was, we need to boost our immune system. And you will discover that 70% of our immune system is established by these microorganisms that line the gastrointestinal tract, called our microbiome, our friendly bacteria, our friendly flora. These microorganisms in the gastrointestinal tract, they do a very similar thing to what they do in the soil. They form a thick turf wall. Here are the roots of the plants, and there's the microorganisms in the soil, and these are just like the roots of the plant, and these are the microorganisms forming a thick turf wall. That's why it's important for a woman at all possible not to take antibiotics in pregnancy, because the antibiotics kill off, they kill off the good and the bad. In fact, one writer said taking an antibiotic is like dropping an atomic bomb in the gut. What did the atomic bomb do? It killed the good and the bad. These microorganisms lining the gastrointestinal tract, they are responsible for the final breakdown of our food. And as we go on the journey through the gut tomorrow, you will discover that these microorganisms, there we go, that worked. These microorganisms, they are responsible for the final breakdown of foods. Now, yes, you'll discover there's enzymes all through the gastrointestinal tract that are breaking down our food, but these microorganisms, they're releasing something else. They're releasing or affecting the release of our B vitamins. They are also causing the production of melatonin, helps us sleep better at night, also causing the production of glutathione, which has been hailed as the #1 antioxidant. And it's not something you can eat, it's something's released because of our gut flora. Our gut flora is also responsible for the absorption of our minerals out of our gut and into the blood. These microorganisms are also play a protective role, and we'll be looking at that when we look at the immune system. And they also are responsible for the nourishment of the cells that line the gastrointestinal tract. We're constantly being remade. These cells that line the gastrointestinal tract, they're remade every 3 to 5 days. So then the question arises, well, how come someone with irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, colitis, gastritis, why don't they heal in 2 weeks? Is that a reasonable question? It's a very reasonable question, and we'll be looking at that in detail tomorrow night. Crohn's disease, it's been called an autoimmune disease. I have to tell you, I do not believe in autoimmune diseases, because God did not design this body to eat itself. Something has happened. It's time to put this resident Y up here that should be on every single board. And if someone has been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, I would like to suggest that it's a good idea to reject that diagnosis, because it's an opinion. Did you hear that? It's an opinion. And so if ever you've been diagnosed with that, you say, thank you so much for your advice. I'm going to seriously consider this. And you go home and you do consider it. You see, God said in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, he said, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, What's power? Isn't knowledge power? Love. Love glues us together, and a sound mind considers the pros and the cons. We should never make a decision because of fear, and I think many people did in 2020. And I know many people now are sorry, because a lot of people thought maybe this is serious, but I think we all know now it wasn't. My husband calls it the great pretend. Well, let's go back to our subject tonight. So as you can see, my aim is to show you that the microorganisms are not the enemy. They're an important part of life on planet Earth. And one of my favourite heroines is Florence Nightingale. Now, Florence Nightingale, in 1854, she was asked to go to Scutari. So Scutari is the port where the wounded from the Crimean War were being taken. The British and the French were fighting the Russians in Crimea. This is the Black Sea. The wounded were put in boats, sailed down to Scutari. And Scutari is the port where the hospital was. The hospital really was just ex-army Turkish barracks that had been hastily put together because of all the wounded. And a war correspondent went to report on the war effort, and he was shocked at what he saw in that hospital. Men were dying like flies. In fact, the death rate in that hospital is 50%. That's greater than on the battlefront. So he went back to London and he wrote headlines, "Did we raise our young men to die like this?" Well, the British government quickly rose up and asked Florence and 35 nurses to go to Scutari to see what she could do. She was shocked. There was raw sewage in the corridors. She met a man who still was in his battle clothes 2 weeks after he'd been admitted. The doctors were not washing their hands between operations. They'd say, "Well, we're already covered in blood." And the doctor said to Florence and her nurses, "You're not coming in here, this is men's business." So they sent her to the kitchen. Well, in the kitchen there were big vats of water with bits of rotten meat in it. That was their food. I think it's a miracle that the death rate wasn't 80% when you look at the conditions. She knew her limitations as a woman in 1854, so she nearly said telegrammed the British government and said, "We need a sanitary commission to come and assess this." And she also telegrammed her father. She wanted a shipload of clean linen, clean bandages, scrubbing brushes and a cook. Meanwhile, another boatload of wounded arrived, 1,200 wounded men, and the hospital was already full. And so the doctor said to Florence and her nurses, "All right, you can come in." And she just got them to start scrubbing and cleaning. The sanitary commission arrived and they discovered that the hospital was built in a swamp. And in the swamp they found a dead horse. In case you don't know, that's a horse. And that's a dog. Dead horse and dead dog in the swamp, and the men in the hospital were drinking the water. So very quickly the sanitary commission assessed it. They got plumbers, they got, started to drain it. They, did all they could. Meanwhile, inside, Florence and her nurses are scrubbing and cleaning, and the clean bandages came, and the cook that started to cook some decent food, and within 2 months the death rate went from 50% to 2%. Now, we can never forget Florence. Now, the man that made the germ theory famous, Louis Pasteur, was a chemist. And when Florence Nightingale read of his theory, she said, "This is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind." And anyone who believes it is equally unstable. Because germs don't cause disease, they're the result. And all Florence did was she got in there and she started cleaning up the place. She started scrubbing and cleaning, and when she went back to England 14 months later, there was a big welcoming party there for her because, oh, how they loved her. That was their sons, their grandsons, their nieces, their nephews that were dying in that hospital. And when she saw the welcoming party, there was Queen Victoria, Prince Albert. She changed her name to Mary Smith and went down the back gangplank and went home. And they said to her later, "Why did you do that?" She said, "I'm not a heroine." She said, "All I did was increase hygiene, sanitation and nutrition." Got that? Hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. She just turned the tap off. So there was nothing for these microorganisms that I just drew for you that are on the other screen, and I'm actually not quite sure how to get it. But I'm sure your memory serves you well on that. You see, they're not the enemy, and she knew that. How come Florence knew that and the doctors didn't? Well, you might be surprised and you might not be surprised. She read her Bible. And in the little book, The Ministry of Healing, there's a chapter in there called the health regulations that God gave the Israelites. Remember Moses in the desert with millions of people? Do you know there was no sickness because there were strict rules of cleanliness. If someone wanted to go to the bathroom, they had to go outside the camp, dig a hole, and no one was to know they had been there. If someone died in the camp, and the only death the report was from old age, the body had to be carried out, dug a hole, buried, and the people carrying that dead body could not go back in the camp for 3 days. They had to wash their clothes, they had to wash their bodies. So there's strict cleanliness rules, so there was no disease in the camp. That's how come Florence Nightingale knew. Did you know that in the 1850s all the sewage from London went into the Thames, and the people living in London drank that water? No wonder the Black Plague happened. See? That's why there's no Black Plague anymore, because it was in the late 1850s they built a sewage system under the streets of London. You might have seen photographs from that time where children would be playing in the gutter, in raw sewage and rats. So I'd like to show you a graph. And you'll see all the childhood illnesses from that time: mumps, measles, rubella, polio, whooping cough, tetanus, diphtheria, and you will find there's a drop in all these diseases. Why? Because of Florence Nightingale. Hygiene, that's first keep the body clean, wash it every day, put clean clothes on every day. Sanitation, keep the house clean, sweep the floor, empty the trash can every day, scrub your bathroom every week. And nutrition. So that's all she did. That's why she said, "I'm not a heroine, all I did was increase hygiene, sanitation and nutrition." And that's why we had a drop in those childhood illnesses, and in some cases 80% wiped out, sometimes 90% wiped out, and that green shows when the childhood shots were introduced. And what are we told? We're told they caused the decrease, but it is not true. Now we've got another graph: attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity, and epilepsy, autism. What caused that? The neurotoxins that are in those shots. What I tell you is the truth, and this can be sussed out. Unfortunately, these graphs have been taken out of the medical journals, but there are several books that are showing these graphs. And that's why if someone says to me, "Should I give my child the shots?" I said, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. You need to investigate." Now the Bible says in Psalm 146 verse 3, "Put not your trust in princes." Who are the princes? The authorities in the field, authorities in government, authorities in nutrition, authorities in medicine, authorities in any field. It doesn't mean you don't go to them. It doesn't mean you get their advice. But what can you do with that advice? You can take it or leave it. You see, God's government is a government of freedom, and freedom is based on free choice. Amen. I am the master of my destiny. I'm the one that chooses what I do and what I do not do to my body. Don't let anyone take that right away from you. It is your God-given right to say, no, thank you very much. Because it's your God-given right. And that's why I believe we all should be our own doctors. I'm not against doctors. Some of my best friends are doctors. And surgery's come a long way, absolutely. But when I broke my arm, my radius, total break out of alignment, just a little bit over a year ago, walking on the rocks with my grandchildren, walking along, and I didn't realise in this big flat rock there was a bit of a dip and there had been water and it recently dried. So I put my foot there, whole body went up, slammed down. Very, very painful. Told me there was something seriously wrong, and the lifesaver came running over, and when she looked at the arm she said, you go straight to the hospital, because it was really weird look. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I'm in hospital waiting to be seen, and I'm so glad God doesn't show you the future. I sat there for 6 hours in the most excruciating pain, waiting to see the orthopaedic surgeon. Why did I sit there? Because the whole system is chocked up with people that have got a sore finger, a sore knee, my blood pressure's gone up, my heart's racing, I feel sick. And the nurse said, have you had anything to drink today? Oh, not much. And I'm sitting there thinking, I can't believe this. I could fix them, 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 I could fix them. Yeah. And you know, I sat there and I thought, they reckon we're an enlightened age. I think we're a dumb age. We don't even know how to look after our bodies. These are simple little things that could easily be fixed. And I am also very thankful for the skill of the orthopaedic surgeon that pulled my radius back into place. And I'm so thankful for the pain-killing medication so I didn't feel him pull it back into place. Absolutely, in a crisis, a drug can be necessary. So we're not talking about that. But we're talking about every little bits and pieces. And I sat there thinking, now I know why I do what I do. To teach people how to look after their own bodies with the simple, natural treatments. Now, before the Australian government saw fit to ban me, because I'll leave it up to you to work out this week whether I'm a threat to public safety, but before the government saw fit to ban me, there used to be several doctors in Australia. They get me to go to their town to give these meetings because they knew that if people knew these simple ways to look after the body, then that would reduce casualty. And the poor doctors and nurses are run off their feet because people don't know how to get a splinter out. They don't know how to fix a sore toe. They don't know how to calm themselves when they've got a... And isn't this the most neglected area of education? And in that little book, The Ministry of Healing, in the chapter, The Physician, the Educator, on the second page it says, the only hope of better things is the education of people in the right principles. And then it says, let the physicians teach the people that restorative power lies not in drugs, but in nature. In nature, there's only one thing that has the ability to heal us, and that is this body. And you will discover this week, as we go through different parts of this body and different ailments, that everything we need, we actually have got. It's inside of us. So there are two basic systems of healing today. One's based on fear. And this system that's based on fear is based on a theory that we evolved. And because we evolved, we cannot heal. And because we cannot heal, then a whole billion-dollar industry was developed to produce drugs. Drugs never heal disease. They just change the form and location. An orthopaedic surgeon said to me, Barbara, I can set a bone, but I cannot heal a bone. That's true. He can set a bone, but he cannot heal it. And this system was based on deception. What's deception? Not as it seems. Another system is based on faith. And the Bible verse for faith is found in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. If you can see it, it's not faith. I had to have a lot of faith in that 6 weeks that this wrist was bound up. It was the longest 6 weeks of my life. But have you noticed it healed? It healed. What an incredible body we have. That's based on faith. And it's based on the fact that we were created in the image of God and we were created with an inbuilt ability to heal. And if you get a cut, it heals, doesn't it? Unless you keep pulling it open. But it'll heal. And you know, there's been a death and no one attended the funeral because no one knew he died. It was the death of common sense. There's a bit of common sense there. It's like I was talking to this guy. He said, oh, there was sun today, so I ran out. And I got so burned. I said, where's your common sense, mate? If you haven't had sun for a while and you lie there for an hour, you're going to be burnt. Now, that's not rocket science, is it? Part of being your own doctor is some common sense. We were created to heal. But sometimes we might need a bit of help. And that's where God gave us herbs. And in Psalm 104, verse 14, the Bible says, God gave herbs for the service of man. I love that verse because the herbs come in to serve you. Where do you want me? What would you like me to do? Medicine calls it synergism, working with the needs of the body. You see, if the human body was designed to heal itself, and the crescendo on Friday night will be the immune system where you will see we have everything we need to heal. If the human body was designed to heal itself, doesn't it make the most sense that to bring about healing in the body is you work with that? You work with that process? So herbs come into your body to serve you. And what I tell you here is the truth. Drugs are like robots. Get out of my way, I've got a job to do whether you need it or not. And that's why I say to people who are on medication for the high blood pressure, for blood thinning, I say, when you change your diet, when you start implementing these herbs, you got to be careful. Your blood might get too thin, not because of the cayenne pepper, because you're still on the blood thinning medication. And that's why one guy came to us and his doctor took him off everything because his blood pressure had gone down, and if he didn't take him off the drugs, he'd start fainting everywhere. And his blood thinning had come back to normal, and if he didn't stop the blood thinning medication, he'd start bleeding everywhere. And can you see what I'm saying? Because the drugs have no intelligence at all. They're just robots. Get out of my way. I've got a job to do, whether you need it or not, but not the herbs. The herbs work with the needs of the body. And so what they do when they plaster your hand now, they do a two-part plaster because of the swelling. And that was great because I could just cut one off. I knew I had to immobilise it, that's common sense for it to heal. But I was able to put comfrey poultices on. And comfrey is a herb that has a growth stimulant. It stimulates rapid healing. In fact, its nickname is knit bone. So every day for a few hours I would put that on. I was talking to a lady recently and she said to her husband, remember the comfrey we had in the garden? It just took over? That's because it's got a growth stimulant. So don't put it in your veggie garden or you'll lose your veggie garden. It'll just take over. Put it somewhere where it doesn't matter if it takes over. Now at the moment, because of the snow and the cold, the leaves are gone, but all the healing properties are in the root. So if you need it in the winter, you dig up the root and grate it. Anyway, it was summer, so I put because we're still in summer in Australia. This is the last month of summer for us. So I put the comfrey on every day, and after 4 weeks, I went back to have an x-ray. Now, when the orthopaedic surgeon pulled it into place and plastered it, they x-rayed it. And he came to me, he said, look, it's pretty good. That was enough for me. I thought, pretty good's enough for me. That comfrey will take it the rest of the way, whatever pretty good meant. I think it meant that it was in line enough, but not perfect. So at 4 weeks, they wanted to x-ray it again just to check if it was all going right. And they were just so puzzled that this 70-year-old woman's bone was almost perfectly healed. At 4 weeks, now it takes 6 weeks to heal a bone, but this, and I know that was healed because I drink water, I eat nourishing food, I eat lots of minerals, I exercise every day, etc., etc. Anyway, so they wanted to replaster it just to be sure. And the male nurse was plastering, and he said, do you have osteoporosis? I said, no. He said, have you had a test? I said, no. And then I realised that sounds a bit strange, especially because of my age, and he threw his head back and he laughed. He'd never heard anything like it. How do I know I don't have osteoporosis? Well, when my body flew up in the air and slammed down on the rock with this hand underneath me, more than that hand would have broken. In fact, they kept saying to me, is your leg all right? Your hip all right? Is it? Yeah, fine. It's just, there might have been something else, but I could feel nothing else but this hand. And what was interesting is once it was pulled into place, I did not need any more painkillers. You see, that was telling me it needed more than a comfrey poultice at that stage. It was incredibly painful. But my husband went to the nurse when I'm sitting there in the most terrible pain after 5 hours and said, my wife, she's been sitting here for 5 hours, look at her arm. And you know what they said? She's on the fast track. I'd hate to be on the slow track. Do you know, that's something to consider too, is little bits and pieces that you could deal with at home instead of sitting in that emergency waiting room. I don't know, they must have had people dying out the back to put me there. But these two methods of healing show us also very clearly, eraser, there it is. They show us very clearly the role that the body plays in healing. And from what I've already shown you, that if there is any bacteria or yeast or anything like that, we have to ask why. And one of the drugs that people are given if there is what's called an infection is an antibiotic. So I'd like to show you what an antibiotic is, but first of all, I want to have a look at that word. What does the word mean? Against? What's biotic? Life. Anything that has the ability to kill a small organism has the potential to kill a large. And we're the large. What is an antibiotic? 1929, Alexander Fleming is growing bacteria in flasks in his laboratory. He comes in one morning and all the bacteria is dead. And he knew Newton's third law of motion. Why? So he began to look around. Nothing in the laboratory could have done it. And so he started to look outside. There was an open window, there was sun's rays coming in, and there was a heavy dust, and he watched it, and it just settled on his flasks. So he looked up, and he saw on the next story there was an open window with a plate of fruit, and in the plate of fruit was a mouldy orange. Do you remember the story from school? And he called that mould penicillium. And he called the mould waste penicillic acid. And that mould waste, the mould waste is actually more toxic than the mould. And the mould waste, called penicillic acid, is the penicillin that we know today. And granted, penicillin has saved the lives of probably millions now. But we've got another problem now. Even the World Health Organization have stated in every doctor's surgery there's a plaque. The biggest concern today is the overuse of antibiotics. And I'm actually thankful for antibiotics because that's what opened my eyes. I was trained as a nurse. In fact, as a child, what are we taught? Get sick, go to doctor, give a tablet or a syrup, get better. I didn't realise that if I'd taken nothing, I would have got better. And then as a nurse, I'm taught the same thing. So when my first child got an earache, at 16 months, went straight to the doctor, especially with everyone saying, don't play with ears, she'll go deaf. So why did I go to the doctor? Out of fear. And I didn't know what else to do. Took the antibiotic, within 24 hours it's eased. Finish the antibiotic, earache comes back. I'm in the doctor 6 weeks later because this has just happened 4 times in a row and he's writing the 5th course of antibiotics. I am so frustrated. I didn't want to hurt my child, but I didn't want to give them any more drugs because what's the definition of insanity? To keep doing the same thing and expect a different result? I said, well, my daughter will be on this for the rest of her life. He was challenged by my questions, sent me to an ear, throat, nose and throat specialist, looked in her mouth, looked in her ears, said, the child's teething. Give her these drops to keep the tubes clear. That opened my eyes. So when next child gets an earache 2 years later, I don't go to the doctor. I don't tell anyone because you get pressure, but you've got to do something. So I went to the old lady next door. I'm 25, she's 85. I said, what did your mother do when you were a little girl with an earache? She said, Mum would steam up an onion on the stove. Steamed up an onion on the stove. James slept 2 hours, never had another earache. I was like a woman possessed. There's something else. There's something else. And we are not taught that there is something else. Well, I wasn't. This was in 1978. I didn't know of anything else. That lady's long and gone, the lady that told me about the young impulse. I'm the old lady now. I'm not quite 80 yet. But I'm thankful for that feeling because till the day I die and have breath, I will teach alternatives because I know what it feels like to have a sick child not want the drugs because all they do is mask. They don't heal. It's only the body that heals. And remember the herbs, God gave herbs for the service of man. Now, what dissipates fear is knowledge, and we can only make decisions on the amount of information we've got. And I agree that the internet has opened the field to information, but also confusion. And that's why I use the Bible and books like The Ministry of Healing and Jethro Kloss's Back to Eden, where he's got about the herbs, and then you can try that. And I know at times I went to the princes, remember, put not your trust in princes. I won't go to the authorities, I'd get an assessment, I'd take the script home, I had it there, but I'd try the onion poultice. Or I'd try the chopped onion on the feet, or I'd try the simple natural remedies. And I can tell you now that no more did a child of mine have an antibiotic. So I raised 6 children. I married Michael 27 years ago. He had 2, I had 6, now we had 8. We now have 25 grandchildren, and yes, now 4 great, and none of them have had drugs. And something else that might interest you, they're all still alive. Because we live in a body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. And it will heal itself when you give it the right conditions. The problem is many people don't know what those conditions are. And my latest book, Sustain Me, I aimed it to be a handbook on natural remedies. so that if something goes wrong in the home, you can go to the book. What do you do for this? What do you do for that? And it's a herb. And if the herb doesn't work, guess what? You've lost nothing. And sometimes you may need to do it a few times. It's like one of our workers, she got an earache. She had to wear an onion poultice on there. Twice a day she did it for 7 days. How many people after 5 days would say, this isn't working, go and get the antibiotic? But I think antibiotics should be kept for life-saving. For life-saving. There's no doubt about it. Sometimes when it is so advanced, that may be necessary. But when you know the natural treatments, you know the old saying, nip it in the bud. As soon as there's an issue, then you start with the simple poultices, and that's what I did with all the children. Yes?
If there is one book to buy, which one would you suggest?
So if there's one book to buy, which one would you suggest? Well, the Self-Heal by Design talks about the true cause of disease, where I explore the true role of microorganisms in disease, and that is paramount in understanding how these microbes work. And it also shows you can't blame the virus. Whereas Sustain Me, I start at the head and I go through the eyes, then we look at the ears, then we look at the teeth and have a whole chapter on teeth and the respiratory, and so I cover bones, I go through pancreas, so you see they do slightly different things. But let me show you a little bit more about what's happening with this antibiotic. When you take an antibiotic, what are you putting into your body? You're putting into your body a mould waste. And I used to say, to date, they have documented 5 million different moulds, yeasts and funguses. And every yeast and fungus and every mould waste has a different effect on a different body part. And my husband, who's my biggest critique, if I pass Michael, I'll pass anyone. He said, I don't believe 5 million. I said, well, check it out. And he came back, he said, 25 million. So there's a lot. And a lot of people don't realise how dangerous mould is. And I think especially in these climates where you've got basements and you've got several months where probably all the windows and everything are closed. Yes, you've got air conditioning and heating, but you have to continually check that. You know, in the old days, they'd have fires. You know what those fires do? They dry the place out. So what can you do when there is a mould presence in the body? First of all, you have to check out why. So I think I'm just going to do something. There we are. No, I don't want that. So what can you do to eliminate yeast or fungus from the body? And what are the most common signs? I think most people are familiar with something like thrush. And how many people have taken an antibiotic and then they get thrush? Do you know the body can cope with 1 or 2 courses of antibiotics in a lifetime? Unfortunately, there are some people that take several courses every year. And there's usually no need. In my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter on water therapy, showing that simple water treatments you can do. I also have a chapter on poultices, showing the different poultices that can be used. It's like my son James. He's working out and he overdid it and his arm swelled, and he knew what Mum used to do, put a grated potato poultice on it, wrap it up, and the swelling came down. But the elbow swelling didn't go down. So he went to the doctor and the doctor said, bursitis. What's bursitis? You know, itis just means inflammation, and bursa is the fluid around the elbow. And he said, I'll give you a course of antibiotics. Now, I also know that not every doctor would prescribe antibiotics for bursitis. It's just inflammation of the bursa. James stood up. He was, I think, 30 at the time. He said, I've never taken an antibiotic in my life and I'm not about to start. And he left. Do you think that doctor has heard that? Do you know, it is up to us to prove that we can do it. And then he rang Mum. I said, elbow, do grated ginger. Ginger is for joint. And he rang up the next day and said, "Thanks, Mum, it's gone down." So there are simple little things that you can do. But the problem is today that I find a lot of people are suffering from yeast or fungus in their body. So yes, it can be jock itch, anal itch, it can be tinea, athlete's foot between the toes, but there are a whole lot of other areas they're finding problems that can be caused by fungus. How does it come into your body? It can be inhaled. So be very careful. One of the worst things you can do to clean mould in the bathroom is bleach. You put bleach and mould together, you create one of the most toxic combinations. So what can you do? There is a time for a mask. I don't know many. I don't know many times, but this is a time. You put the mask on and you fill a spray bottle with just white vinegar and you spray it. You spray it if there's any mould and quickly leave. And in only 10 minutes it will be killed. Then you go in and you can wipe it up. But then you've got to ring up the plumber or the painter or the builder or whoever to find out why the mould is there, because there should not be mould in the house. If the house is high and dry and you've got fans on, there should not be mould there. So it can be inhaled. It also can be ingested. So never eat anything that has any trace of mould on it. And also it can be ingested if it's taken as an antibiotic. And it can also come in through the skin. So please don't touch anything that has mould on it, because your skin can start to absorb it. And it also can be transmitted sexually. You'll find most sexually transmitted disease have a fungus base. It's called myco. If you go to the medical dictionary and look up myco, you'll find about 4 pages of diseases that begin with myco. And then the $1 million question is, how do you get it out of the body? Number 1, starve. What's its favourite food? Sugars, yes. So in my book, Self-Heal by Design, I've got the antifungal stage 1 diet. So it's just getting the fruits right down, definitely stopping all refined sugars, definitely even stopping concentrated sugars. It's not forever, it's just until you conquer it. My husband, when we married, he was 40 and he had terrible tinea. And I'd wake at night with him just scratching, and he had it also in some other parts. And then I heard his history, because it's good to know the history. When he was, I think about 25, he had to have his wisdom teeth out, and he decided to do it on the cheap and let the students do it. Put him under general anaesthetic, and they were wiring his jaw open and they broke his jaw. Yeah, pay the extra money, get it done properly. When he woke up, his face was like this. Anyway, long story short, he had to go on some very strong antibiotics, which I do think probably saved his life. But now he had these yeast and fungal problems. And so what I did, I put him on a very strict diet. I used to watch if he had a whole bunch of grapes, wow, his toes had flared. So we got rid of all the really sweet things. And he chose to just stop fruit. So what he'd have for breakfast, I'd cook him a little bowl of vegetables. He'd have avocado on a sourdough toast with lentils on top, or he might have scrambled tofu on top, some nuts and seeds. So he ate like that, and he said at first he thought his throat was cut, but after a while he started to enjoy it, especially with the symptoms easing, and I gave him herbs. There's the kill. And there are herbs that will kill fungus and will not kill you. Garlic's a good one. In my book I list a few. Olive leaf extract's a good one. Also grapefruit seed extract. If you ever bitten onto a seed in the grapefruit, you'll think grapefruit's sweet when you bite that seed. It's strong volatile oils. Back to starve, you also got to be careful there's no exposure to any more mould. And dietary-wise, stop all the yeasts and all the sugars, kill. We did herbs with him, and also bring back the balance. Bring back the balance in the gastrointestinal tract with probiotics. Probiotics means for life, and probiotics is restoring the balance in the gastrointestinal tract. Because what the antibiotics had done to him, that had caused a massive imbalance in his gut. Another great thing you can do, and we'll talk about this a bit more tomorrow night when we go through the gut, is increasing cultured foods like yogurts. You can get some very nice coconut yogurts. I've even seen a cashew yogurt or a almond yogurt. Kefir's another good one. Sauerkraut's another nice one. But if someone's been on antibiotics, initially they will need to take a probiotic supplement, and that's like a little powder that can be taken 3/4 of an hour before breakfast. So it's bringing back the balance. So that's a simple formula to restore balance back into the body. Our body runs according to precision balance. And what those antibiotics do is they disrupt. Remember, this is the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, and this is the gut flora that lines the gut. When an antibiotic comes in, that gut flora, it starts to break down. And what you've now lost is you've lost the ability to break the food down properly, release those nutrients from the food, the proper absorption. You've also lost your protection and nourishment, so it's vital that the balance be once again restored. In our gut was millions of different microorganisms, and one of them is Candida albicans, and there are dozens of different species of Candida albicans, and they require lactobacillus acidophilus and bifidobacterium in there to keep them in their right balance. But what antibiotics do is they kill off the lactobacillus acidophilus and bifidobacterium. I am speaking English. And what those probiotics do, they replace that, they restore it, they bring it back. And after 6 weeks on the no fruit, my husband said, "Do I have to go back to fruit?" And so it is now 12 years later, and when I'm home, I cook him veggies every morning. Because that just sits so very well with him. And I hear him say to people, "I never thought I'd be free of this terrible toes." You know, he'd just be scratching, he'd be grinding his toes against the floor. He just thought that's something he had to do. Do you know, he did go to the doctor at first, and the doctor gave him a cortisone cream, like a cortisone cream to put on it. And whenever he put it on, it'd go away, and the palms of his hands would go bright red. So he'd stop and the hands would go down, but then the itch would come back in about a week. But every time he did it, the hands would go bright red. So he went to the doctor after experimenting for a month. He said, "Look, whenever I put that cortisone cream on, it goes, but my hands go bright red." And the doctor said, "No, it's not that. It's got nothing to do with it." That's why you're the doctor. Because only you know how you feel, only you know what you've been through, and that's why you're the best one to know, and the best health professional will listen to you and listen to what you've got to say, because you're the one that lives in the body. That's why, again, it rests with us to choose what we do and what we do not do to the body. And so Michael says the best thing that ever happened to him was going on that strict diet. Does he eat fruit? Yeah, he does eat fruit, but it's not a huge part of his diet now. And what I find, and I see this many, many times, that people change the diet, change the lifestyle, and we'll be looking at that in more detail as we go through, especially on other lectures, that the body starts to work better. And then when it starts working better, you're now getting quality of life. But what I find is it's a management program, and if you can manage your situation, you're doing well. And everyone I know is managing something. And one day, the Bible says, Jesus will come in the clouds of glory and we'll all be cured. But until then, we manage. And so just before we have a break, I'm going to tell you a funny story about my husband. See, Michael and I run up and down hills every morning. And in 2020, it was illegal to hold a protest. So Michael held one every 2 weeks. Isn't that time for us to stand when we're told that? Any government that comes within a mandate, that's not from God, because God gives free choice. And so there are about 500 people and about 300 police, and they came up to Michael and said, "Sir, if you stand to speak, we will arrest you." He said, "That'll be interesting." And he stood up and he began to speak. They said, "Excuse me, sir, you can't speak." Michael said, "I haven't finished yet." And he continued to talk. And they grabbed him. And they're walking away with him, and they weren't holding him very hard. I wasn't there, but he told me the story later. He said, "I thought I'd have a bit of fun," and he ran. And they couldn't catch him. Now, Michael has white hair. Both his parents were white at 50. And he looks like an elderly gentleman, but he's quite slim, but he's very fit, because we run up and down hills. They could not catch him. And so he ran in and out all around the crowds, and the crowds are whistling and cheering. And they're taking a photo, they're filming it. And he thought, maybe after 5 minutes, I better let them catch me. So they jumped on him. Anyway, they decided not to arrest him, just to fine him. So he's standing at the desk, and the policeman's there to take his particulars, and this big guy comes up, built like this, tattoos all over him, big beard. He said, "Are they hurting you, mate?" And he said, "I'm fine." And he said to the policeman, "You heard him, you answer to us." And he looked over there, and there was a whole team of bikies. What do we call them? God's angels. And when he said that to the policeman went... That night, it was on the nightly news. These police running after this grey-haired gentleman, and they couldn't catch him. So 2 weeks later, when Michael held his next protest, there were hardly any police, and they just stood back. Do you know, it's time to make a stand, and that's why it's important for us to keep fit, because we never know whether we'll be in a situation like that. We're going to have a break now, and we're going to have a break of 15 minutes, I believe, yes. And when we come back, we're going to have a look at a word that strikes fear into many hearts today. It's cancer. We're going to look at the truth on cancer.